While units like Bard and Yona quickly established themselves at the start of the set, it took a few days for players to take notice of the ghostly trait. Now this video is not going to be about balance, the trait did get nerfed recently after all. Instead, I want to focus on how this trait actually works. I don't think there's any comparable trait that is responsible for so many questions, so let's take a look at what is causing all of this confusion. The trait description states that upon dealing or taking damage 6 times, ghostly units send 2 specters to haunt nearby enemies every 2 seconds. Haunted enemies take bonus damage for each specter on them and pass these specters on death. Going deeper into the trait simply increases this damage amount by a higher percentage. Okay, let's take this trait description and put it into the garbage can where it belongs. While in theory the description does cover the basics, the devil is in the details. First things first, the part about attacking and taking damage 6 times is individual for every ghostly unit. Once it procs, you can see how the 2 specters fly from that unit towards the 2 closest enemies. This effect can only happen once per fight for every ghostly unit. This means building a bunch of attack speed won't make you magically spawn more ghosts, it is 2 per ghostly unit that you have on your board. The same applies for the healing part of this trait. Spawning the ghosts will also trigger the passive healing for that ghostly unit. Now for the big one, the bonus damage. The trait description doesn't state it for some reason, but the bonus damage is magic and the calculation behind it can be rather confusing. Let's say an enemy unit is haunted by 3 specters and you're running 2 ghostly. Every time the haunted unit takes damage, the trait will add an additional 15% magic damage. But this number is a bit misleading because ghostly is based on pre-mitigation damage. This means the armor value doesn't influence the ghostly damage at all. Just imagine this Kobuko is wearing a bunch of chain vests. Now this would result in less physical damage from units like Caitlyn, but the magic damage that come from her attacks would be exactly the same as before. And this is where magic resistance comes into play. The MR of a haunted unit will reduce the magic damage coming from ghostly. There are players out there who are saying that ghostly damage isn't affected by MR, but this is simply not true. A unit with a Dragon's Claw will take a lot less damage from the ghostly trait. This also means that items like Static Shift and especially Ionic Spark are absolute must-have items if you're playing vertical ghostly, since you will do way more damage to haunted units. You might ask yourself, if this is the case, why is everyone building Last Whisper on Senna? The answer here is simply to make the physical part of Senna more relevant. The magic damage from ghostly won't get increased if Senna is hitting a unit with less armor, but it's still a useful item, especially in the early mid game, to just increase the damage from physical attacks. Unfortunately, the discussion regarding the damage is still not done. While I did say that the damage is based around pre-mitigation, the damage can still get reduced by damage reduction. Traits like Warden, Porcelain, or items like Steadfast Heart are still capable of reducing the incoming damage. One item that should be mentioned here is Bramble Vest. The effect states that it reduces damage from attacks, and while the item only gives armor, it is in fact capable of reducing the magic damage resulting from enemy auto attacks, but this item appears to be somewhat of an exception. Speaking of items, how exactly do they interact with ghostly? The answer is rather simple. You cannot proc ghostly faster with the help of any items, and items won't end up dealing more bonus damage. The trait pretty much follows the same rules as Titan's Resolve. For example, if a unit has a Titans and a Hurricane, would that unit receive 2 Titan stacks with 1 attack? The answer is no. But since we established at the start that you can only proc the ghostly effect once per unit, this doesn't really matter all that much anyways. Critical strike items like Infinity Edge, on the other hand, are very useful. The game knows if a unit critically strikes in advance, and the bonus damage coming from crits is taken into consideration and will result in ghostly dealing more magic damage on top of the attack. One more item that I think is worth talking about is Trixes Glass. Trixes Glass is an artifact that grants you a copy of one of your units. You can put this artifact on any of your frontline ghostly units like Aatrox or Illaoi, or put it on Morgana and place the copy in the second row. This is to quickly get 2 additional specters out, which has likely more of an impact than copying a non-ghostly unit. By positioning all of your ghostly units on the same side, you can quickly reach a scenario where some of the enemy units are haunted by most of the specters and therefore take a massive amount of increased damage. While it has been rather frustrating to constantly have your team smashed by Shenna comps, maybe the latest nerfs were enough to tune down this comp. Do you think ghostly is still a major issue in the latest patch? Let me know in the comments. I hope you learned something and see you next time.